Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarev's Chess channel and welcome to the Altibox Norway Chess tournament in 2020. This is now really one of the most important chess events in 2020 as for the first time after a long time the games are again played over the board. So they're not played online like we had now many great tournaments, but I think we saw the problems of this online chess games when you lose, for instance, your internet connection, then you lose the game, and sometimes it's not fair when you have a better position. So the online chess was really complicated. I really like more this over the board chess, when you feel the wooden board, when you meet your opponents, when you handshake your opponents, when you maybe drink a cold one or a coffee after the game. So it's really a different feeling, and I'm really glad that normal chess is back. And today finally started with this Altibox Norway Chess tournament, in which we'll have now 6 top grandmasters. It's Levon Aronian, Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano, Caruana, Jan-Krzysztof, Duda, Alireza, Firouzja, and also Aryan, Tari from Norway. So they will play a double round robin, but the cool part of this tournament that no draws can happen. If a draw happens, then the players have to play the Armageddon game, and the Armageddon game is set up like this. White has 10 minutes on the clock, black has only 7. If black manages to get a draw or win, of course black wins the game, but after 40 moves black will also have 1 second increment on the clock. So it's, I think, sometimes bad, sometimes good, this Armageddon decision, but okay, at least we know who is the winner after a match game, so I think it's a fair decision so far. Today we'll start this tournament with the game between Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen, and the cool part is that the ratings are back, so you can get some ratings. So in the first game, Magnus Carlsen and Levon Aronian draw, and Magnus lost, of course, some rating points because he's much higher on the ranking list. Levon Aronian got some rating points, and we all know that we love our ratings because every chess player, I think, is thinking that he's better than his current ELO rating is showing us. So we are a little bit egocentric, all of us, when we play chess. But as I said, it's really important to battle for something, and the rating part is really great that it's back. So let's check out now the Armageddon game. So as I said, the first game ended in the draw. Again, Levon Aronian had to play with the white pieces, so the player who plays the first game with the white pieces has to play again the Armageddon with the white pieces, and Levon opened with the move d4. Magnus responds with knight to f6. We have c4, e6, knight to f3, the counter Nxe4 Nd7 setup. I've explained it many times, and I'll explain it again. Of course, knight to f3 is, I think, in my opinion, much better than this knight to c3 idea, because then you risk also some bishop to b4 ideas, and after bishop to c3 you risk also this double pawn structure, which could be, I think, a strategical problem, although it's main theory. But I played also sometimes knight to c3, knight to f3, and it seemed to me that the game after move bishop to b4 after knight to c3 is much more complicated. So this counter Nxe4 Nd7 setup I use also most of the times against the Queen's Indian setups by black. So we have d5, the Queen's Gambit declined so far, knight to c3, the 3 knights variation, and now a6, the Janovsky variation, and it's already a very tricky line. Magnus has played it several times in the past. The idea about this move a6 is to capture the pawn, d takes c4, and then you could have a further protection of your c4 pawn with the potential b5. So here I wanted to show how bad you can maybe respond after remove a6, how this is really a tricky idea by black. If you play, for instance, something like bishop to f4, then d takes c4 can happen, and if you try a4 to finally maybe block the potential b5 move, you get bishop to b4, and after something like e3 you see knight to d5, and black has really a comfortable game. So that's why you have to be careful. I most of the time played really this line that Levon Aronian is using now. It's c takes d5. After e takes d5 we have now really a static position, and knight takes d5 is not such a good idea, I think, because you risk this move e4, and after knight to c3 maybe b takes c3 and c5, black could maybe go into a similar structure like in the Tarrasch. For those who have played maybe the Tarrasch defense, they know what I'm talking about. c5 would be sort of a pawn breakthrough, but the problem is now for black here, that's why I don't think it's good to recapture with the knight in the center. is that you have already lost the tempo, and it gives now white the opportunity to play the move rook to b1. Now after the move c takes d4, c takes d4, you see the normal Tarrasch line would be bishop to b4, and we would have to cover with our bishop here and trade off more pieces. But now with the move rook to b1, after a6 we see we get an extra tempo, and now the bishop on b4 idea is not going to happen now in this particular line, and we still can proceed with the powerful central control with our pawns, and also continuing finally the game with our dark square bishop. So in the normal Tarrasch it's not possible because black will play bishop to b4, and then you have to cover with the move bishop to d2. I'm sorry if I'm showing you too much theory, but it's really important now to solve these positional problems in the beginning. After c takes d5, we have e takes d5, and now we have the so-called static center position. I've explained it many times, and I'll explain it again what it means. It means now that white and black shouldn't proceed here with potential e5, e4, or maybe c5 pawn breakers, because the position is static. You shouldn't touch pawns in the center. If you do that, then you see from black's perspective, if you play, for instance, something like c5 after d takes c5, then you risk always to get an isolated pawn in the center. The same happens if you try e4, for instance. If e4 would be possible, so far it's not possible, but after potential d takes e4, then white is continuing the game with an isolated pawn. And the main ideas in these types of positions, when you face really the static position, when the pawns are really like that they cannot move in the center, then you should always search for outposts. For instance, white should search outposts on e5, and maybe here on c5. This could be also a weakness in black's position. On the other hand, black is trying an outpost maybe here on e4, or maybe here on c4. So bishop to g5, played by Levon Aronian. We have bishop to e6, which is a normal idea in these types of setups, because the bishop has taken out the normal square for the knight. So the bishop on e6 can stay here, and you cannot attack it with the knight. So that's why here Magnus uses this moment, and he can now develop this other knight on a natural square, maybe on d7, and try maybe a b6, but then c5 pawn breakthrough, because then you don't risk this isolated pawn situation, because you could have a support with your b pawn. So bishop to f6, very aggressive line here by Levon Aronian. Queen to f6, and now queen to b3. You see the problems, two clear targets here. It's the weak pawn on d5, also the weak pawn on b7, b6 played by Levon Aronian, and here Levon tries g3. The idea is clear: bishop to g2 and attacking also the weak d5 pawn. If you take the pawn immediately, it is a complicated line, but I think here after queen to d8 you could cover maybe with the move e4, but now c6, you see that's the problem. If you try bishop to c4, okay, black will simply take. Still, it's a complicated game, but I think black is much better, although my stockfish evaluation here that says that black is slightly better, but still I think Magnus Carlsen would win this game very easily with the whole piece up. So that's why here g3, trying another path to attack here the d5 weakness in the game, queen to d8, which is really a strange idea by Magnus Carlsen, but it's really the suggested move by the engine. It's really a necessary move. You want to defend first of all your pawn on d5, and then get use of the bishop pair. The main strength that black has here in the position is of course the bishop pair. What white should do in these types of position is to get rid of at least one of these bishops. Then I think white has a comfortable game. That's why in the game Levon Aronian tries really this great theoretical novelty, h4. The idea is again clear. We want to play bishop to h3 and simply get rid of the light square bishop. Then black doesn't have any more the bishop there. So bishop to e7, we have bishop to h3, castling, and now queenside castling by Levon Aronian. Levon goes all in here because he feels that something could happen here on the d file. Now maybe e4 pawn breakthrough could work, as when you face this isolated pawn situation after potential e4, then of course you want to have some kind of a progress. At least you want to support your isolated pawn, and now after e4, a d5 pawn breakthrough could be really dangerous to handle here for black. So here Magnus takes bishop to h3, a mistake here by Magnus Carlsen, which Levon Aronian unfortunately didn't punish. The best move here for white is simply to proceed queen to d5. That's the main tactic that Levon Aronian missed. He took the bishop on h3, but let's see now what happens if you play the move queen to d5. Here queen to d5, knight to d5. You see now both pieces are hanging, and there are now several choices what to do. If you retreat with this bishop on e6, we'll simply take this. If you try bishop to d6, we'll simply take this bishop on h3. And as I said, white is a pawn knight. White has, I think, a good game. But the funny part is what happens if you try, for instance, bishop to h4. If you try to get a pawn back, then it's really, really weird here. Knight to h4, and you could make a mistake with the move bishop to e6, which seems like a natural idea to attack the knight on d5, but now you're getting checkmated with the move knight to e7. You see king to h8, and now knight to g6. The fork on the rook and the king you have to take with the f pawn, but now comes the stunner. We have rook to h7, king to h7, and now rook to h1. You could only cover with the bishop on h3, but it only prolongs the game a little bit, and it's really one of the coolest checkmates. So that was a tactical line, as I said, after potential queen to d5, which Levon Aronian really missed. Rook to h3, we have c6, played by Magnus, protecting this d5 pawn. A better idea here by Magnus is maybe here even to proceed with the move c6, but then try really to b5, because here Levon really tries the move e4 to break the position and followed with d5. But now Magnus again makes, I think, a slight inaccuracy with the move e4. Here b5 is much better, because after e takes d5, we could proceed here with the move b4, and after knight to a4, now it's time to take the pawn, and here after maybe something like king to b1, knight to c6, and now the knight could search really for a cool path here, knight to a5, and here on a very active square on c4 with the support of the rook, maybe to get the rook on the b file, this other rook on the c file. This could be really dangerous attack against white's king. So as I said in the previous couple of moves here, rook to h3 was the main mistake of Levon Aronian. If he would have taken the queen with the queen, the pawn on d5, he has really a better game. Every other continuation is simply slightly better here for black. So here Magnus took d takes e4, knight to e4. We have knight to d7. You have to develop, of course, your knight, and now queen to c2, knight to f6. Magnus goes into a simplified line, knight to e5, knight takes e4, knight takes queen to e4, and now bishop to f6. Magnus goes really into a drawish position because he needs only a draw, as he is playing with black this Armageddon game. We have g4, rook to e8, g5, bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and now queen to e7, attacking the pawn on e5, f4, rook to d8, simply competing with the rook on the d file, rook to d3, rook takes d3, queen to d3, and now queen to e6, attacking the pawn on a2. This is really normal chess now. The only way I think both players can win this game, if this other player makes a huge blunder. This is basically a drawish position with the same pawns count on the board, with the rooks, with the queens on the board. As I said, you can lose this if you really make a huge blunder. So b3, we have queen to b4, we have queen to e4, g6, and now rook to d2, c5, and now queen to c6, simply attacking the rook. But now Magnus, of course, retreats, rook to f8, queen to f6, queen to takes h4, and now king to c2. Still, this is a draw because Levon Aronian can always go something like rook to d8. After trades of rooks, go queen to d8, queen to f6, doing this perpetual. Queen to e1, we have queen to c6, queen to e3, queen to f6. Here b5, rook to d3, queen to e2, rook to d2. Again, Magnus Carlsen is doing so perpetuals. And now finally c4, we have b takes c4, and after b takes c4, here Levon Aronian makes now a huge blunder, king to a3. Here Magnus simply attacked the king with an attack on the rook, and in this position Levon Aronian resigns. So as I said, the main drawish line is here to play rook to d8, simply forcing the trades of rooks and going into a perpetual. But the draw doesn't bring anything to Levon Aronian, because with the draw he loses the game. So okay, this is now our first game from this tournament. Great defensive play by Magnus, but you saw this was really an interesting line by Levon Aronian. He had his opportunities against the world champion. in the Sianovsky variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. Okay, we'll see now what will happen in continuation of the tournament. I'll try to cover more and more of these games. I think this will be again very interesting because we need really this chess again over the board. And I hope you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot because at least we saw this theoretical novelty. If you want to see some other games from some other tournaments, check out my commented chess games. Here's the link. And if you want to see the best chess games played by the top engines now from these days, check out my commented chess games played by computers. And if you like my content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.